It takes a lot to get there, especially if you don't have support like we don't. After the election results, I heard a lot of people talking about moving to different states. If you know, you know. So I kind of thought about it ourselves, and we actually for once thought, like, what would our life look like if we moved to a different state? I give the example of Minnesota just because we already have family there and for other reasons. So I kind of priced it out. I thought about it. What would life look like moving to a different state? First of all, it's a privilege to be able to move to a different state, to move across the country, up and move, because it costs a lot of money if you have to hire someone to move for you, which people like us, we don't have a village, we don't have like a big family slash community to just up and help us move. We would have to hire someone, just like we hired someone to move us into this house, which was in the same state. So it can cost a lot of money. It can cost thousands, maybe even up to 5 figures. So if you have that type of money like on hand, ready to move, that's amazing for you. But most people don't. It's something you really have to plan out. And so other things I wanted to think about as a homeowner myself is, what are property taxes like in Minnesota? And I did look at that, and I did feel like it was, in general, it was less than what we're paying here in Ohio. So that's one thing, but you also have to think about other things. People might bring up the fact that there's no sales tax in Minnesota, but if you look that up, it's actually only on certain items. Like, it's not on every single thing. I will look it up to be sure, but I'm pretty sure that that was the case. But things that would more so impact you, because if you're like us and you don't spend a whole lot of money out, like we don't shop a lot in general, we don't do that. So it's not that much of savings when you think about it in that scenario. And if you are spending enough for it to make a difference, you probably might need to reconsider, unless you have like a business or something like that. But income tax rates, like there's income taxes in Minnesota. That's something to think about. Here in Ohio, where we live, they're pretty affordable. So it kind of ranges. Let's just say from like 2.75%, 3.75% here in Ohio, depending on how much you make. So I looked it up in Minnesota, and it's more than double that. For our income range, which would fall in the bracket of the 46,000 to the 184,000 for married filing jointly, that would be 6.8%, which, like I said, that is double what we're currently paying. So that's something to think about, like you're going to be paying significantly more in taxes. Technically, your federal tax rate wouldn't change, but with moving states, you have to think about that. Another thing to think about, like if your parents, like us in our household, people who don't have kids, you could just up and move. Sure, if you have the money and you're okay with the laws and the income taxes and just all those things that would affect you. If you don't have kids, you're able to just up and move whenever you want. But if you're like us, you can't just move your kids in the middle of the school year on a Tuesday. That's just not the ideal thing to do. Technically, could you do it? Sure. Would you want to? Is it like the best thing for your child? Is it providing stability? No, you're probably going to want to move in the summertime when they're in between school years, at least. And then also, depending on how old your kids are, if they're older, they might have something to say about being like up and moving to a different state. So there's a lot of things to consider in that route. How does school go, and that's where you're moving to? Like, is there any cost associated? Like, do they have fees to get signed up at school? Like my kid's school right now, they have fees, but it's very minimal. It's like maybe $40 for the school year, but is it more where you're moving to? Like, that's just things to think about. Other things to consider is, what are the prices of homes like where you're moving to? If you're someone who's renting, you have to think about what is renting like in those areas. But for ourselves, we probably would be looking for a house. Are house prices comparable to where you currently are? If you're going to sell your current house to buy your next one, are you going to be left over with money? Like, are you going to be able to actually buy it outright? Like us, we don't want another mortgage. We would be looking to buy it outright using the sale price. I still don't really know how that would work when it comes to like selling our house, using this money to buy another house. I know in some places or in some situations, you might be able to like lease back your house, where your closing date might be this day, but then the buyers agree to let you stay there for 30 days or to get that money already and use that to buy the new one. Honestly, all of that, it sounds like a lot to me. It's a little confusing. It sounds a little bit stressful, because what if one thing falls through? It could just be bad for everyone. But that's something to also think about. Some people talk about like moving to places with no state income tax, and honestly, I feel with most places that there's no state income tax, I feel like there's some type of trade-off. For example, Florida has no state income tax, but you pay for that if insurance, like the hurricane, so that insurance rates are really high. All of those things, it's more expensive in that scenario. So it's definitely a trade-off with that. One place that I thought of, was like Tennessee. I know they don't have state income tax, but then my husband was looking at some houses, and the houses were very expensive. Like the same house that you'd pay for there being like 600, 700,000. I think that here it would be like 300, 400,000. Granted, the property taxes, again, they were very affordable for those houses, but that's not really worth it in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think. I just feel like there's that trade-off with most places that have no state income tax. For example, Texas. But they also had a lot of issues over the years recently. They did have their own hurricane, if I'm not mistaken. They had those issues where pipes were bursting in Texas recently. They didn't know how to handle the ice that suddenly happened. Like, all of those things. My husband did grow up in Texas, and we did consider living there for a short amount of time. And I don't know if that weather impacted everyone, but there's just like a lot to think about with that type of stuff. So overall, I just say if you're looking to move across the country, and I know a lot of people were talking about it recently, just remember that there's a lot of things that come with it. When I was really thinking about it for us, I was like, wow, what would that actually look like? Because for us to actually save up all that money, we would need to take like probably at least a year or 2 years to really prepare for something like that. Buying a house after us still wanting to pay off our house, it would take more time than you expect. So just keep that in mind. You really have to do your research. You can't just up and move. It takes a lot to get there, especially if you don't have support like we don't. So let me know what you guys think. Would you guys move across the country? If you have, what did those costs look like for you? I know that I talked about this on social media, and some people were like affirming that yes, it did cost them thousands of dollars just to move. So I'm definitely curious on other people's experiences.